Greetings, everyone. So I grew up in the 80s, which was an era of really good music and good basketball. And our kids now listen to 80s music, which is fascinating because we know all the same songs that our kids like. But as we got into the 90s and we hit this, the 90s era, which now was in my career and pastoring, we hit this year that was 1998. And I was looking around the crowd at some of you young folks wondering, who wasn't yet born in 1998? Would you just raise your hand? If you raise them high, not even yet born. All right, so I want to remind some of you what 1998 was like and then teach others of you what 1998 was like. All right, so in 1998, gas was $1 a gallon. I mean, think about that. Now, I live in California where gas is $40 a gallon right now. And eggs were $1 a dozen. And so, if you bought eggs lately, if you're working out a little bit and buying some eggs, they're not $1. In 1998, the average house was $129,000. Now, that kind of sounds expensive, but not if you live in California or Dallas, Texas, or any other city now. Imagine if you could buy a house now for $129,000. In 1998, I was a youth pastor with no kids and looked like that. All right, so I know you think, man, you haven't even aged, and your wife hasn't aged either, and you'd be right, particularly about the latter. So that was us. Like I said to Chandra, what is that picture from? She's like, that was our first youth pastorate when you had to wear a suit and tie, and then I had to do youth ministry in a suit and tie on Sunday. And I remember saying to the church, do I really have to wear a tie every Sunday? And finally, they let me take the coat off, but I still had to wear the tie for a long time while I was teaching kids youth ministry. And now I have 4 adult children, so I had no kids. So you might be saying, well, how did you get such a tall son? See that picture? I'm looking at it down there. Well, all my life, I played basketball my whole life, and I just wanted to touch the net. You remember that? I was just jumping up trying to touch the net. So God gave me a son who's 6'6", who can dunk a basketball, and I can live through him. So that's my family now. Michael Jordan in 1998 dominated the NBA, and LeBron James was 13 years old. Now, LeBron James is like 70 now, so it was a long time ago. In 1998, there was no Facebook, there was no YouTube, there was no Twitter, there was no Instagram, and we had dial-up internet through America Online. Can you make the sound for me right now of what dial-up internet? Go ahead, do it right now. That's the sound. It was horrible. And then you would sit there waiting for a picture to load for like 3 minutes, if you remember that. You guys that were not born in 1998, man, you don't even know. It was horrible. In 1998, Google was started by 2 Stanford PhD students. There were no phones with cameras. There were no iPhones. There were no iPods. There was no Amazon Kindle. There was no Google Maps. I don't know how we ever got anywhere. There was no Gmail. There was no Wikipedia to provide us with accurate data. And iTunes did not exist in 1998. You could buy a portable CD player for $35 in 1998. And people would literally strap these on their sides and walk around with headphones on and run into people. You could go to Blockbuster Video and you could rent a movie. You remember that? Like walking through and renting a movie. And then what would you do with that movie later? You would forget to return it until it was $30 for a $3 video. Titanic won the Best Picture at the Oscars. In 1998, Eminem's career was launched by Dr. Dre. Britney Spears, before she was grabbing the elbow of NBA players in Las Vegas, she recorded Hit Me Baby One More Time, and NSYNC became a world-famous boy band. Now, don't pretend that you don't still listen to Justin Timberlake today. In 1998, Seinfeld aired its last episode, Frank Sinatra died, and in 1998, Acts 29 was born. So Acts 29 is older than some of you who are in the room today. Acts 29 began as a small group of pastors and church planters who connected around a shared vision for planting churches, who were focused on preaching the gospel, making disciples, and engaging with the culture. I wasn't part of it in 1998 because I was in that picture wearing a suit and tie, and Acts 29 people were not. But in 1998, like Tyler Jones joined Acts 29 shortly after that, was one of the first 5 or 6 church leaders in Acts 29. It was a small group of guys who got together and said, let's do this together. And 25 years later, in fact, we just recently decided that our national conference is going to be here in the Dallas area. We're going to focus on the fact that it's our 25-year anniversary. Now listen, we've had our challenges and less than awesome moments. In fact, last night we did a lead pastor's dinner, and Matt Chandler was at that dinner, was speaking, and he said, we've had a couple events in Acts 29 that probably should have sunk us. And there's a sense that's like, hey, we're still here. God in his providence has chosen for Acts 29 to still be here and to be planting churches in the inner loop of Houston right now in 2023. And we have a rich history. In fact, I've seen many of you here that I've known for 20 or 25 years. We've supported each other and we've encouraged each other and we've collaborated together and we've learned about gospel centrality together. I remember the first time I ever heard a Tim Keller sermon, and I just thought, what is this? Is this what Presbyterians do? I didn't even know what Presbyterians were, except they played on a different basketball team in the church league, and they swore a lot more than the Baptists because they were so free. They would smoke as they played basketball. So when you think about, I just remember all those of us that are older, like the times that we've walked through together in Acts 29. There's nothing in the world like Acts 29. And listen, I chose to lead this. I stepped into this role a little over 3 years ago. I've been in a lot of roles in Acts 29, but I chose to step into this role 3 years ago, 1 month before COVID. It's a great time to take a new job. And because I believe there's nothing in the world like Acts 29. Theology, relationship, church planting. I see the bottom of this music stand. Think of 3 legs of the stool. Theology, relationship, and church planting. We have theological alignment and camaraderie. We have relationships and are committed to each other. We're committed to church planting. And I think, who else is doing this? It's been an honor to be a part of Acts 29. Now, what I'm going to do today is I'm not going to preach. That's not what I've been assigned to do. We decided and this applies to you if you're brand new, if you're male or female, if you've been here in Acts 29 for a lot of years, if you are watching online, maybe this recording later, and you're wondering, what is Acts 29 all about? What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you a little bit. I've just talked about where we've come from. I want to talk about where we are today and give you a little bit of insight into where we're headed in the future. And I promise that there will be some helpful questions answered for you going forward. Now listen, today, Acts 29 is a network of nearly 800 theologically aligned churches that are in relationship with each other and are committed to church planting. We gather in regions and areas and cohorts to strengthen each other and to work together. We collectively give over $30 million a year. That's all of us together to church planting. And that's a conservative estimate because a lot of churches go above and beyond what we even know about. We have one church that spends nearly $4 million a year just on church planting. It's incredible. We assess church planters continuously all around the world. 9 are being assessed here in Dallas starting today. I think about Taylor, who's probably in the room, who's here to be assessed, who's planting a church in Sparks, Nevada, like 10 hours north of me. I've just gotten to know Taylor. He was in a class I taught at Grimke Seminary, and we've spent some time together recently. He's one of 9 church planters being assessed here. We have 209 current applicants who want to plant a church with Acts 29. 209. We have 131 candidates who've been assessed and are headed toward planting an Acts 29 church. Conservatively, as Jesse just mentioned, we have 157,000 people in the U.S. alone that are part of Acts 29 churches, hearing the gospel, being taught good theology, reaching people for Christ, and part of church planting. In fact, in 2022, Acts 29 churches reported 8,500 people that have come to Christ in our churches. 8,500 people. Now, I stepped outside after our Sunday service a couple weeks ago, and we were doing baptisms. And I just thought, man, and this is so amazing, seeing people be baptized. My youngest daughter, who's 18, who just graduated from high school, one of the kids in her friend group was baptized last week. So she went to a different church last Sunday. She said, Dad, I'm going to see my friend be baptized today. We've seen 8,500 people baptized in Acts 29 churches, or 8,500 people converted to Christ, and 7,000 baptisms last year in Acts 29 churches. When I see these 2 guys up here that are planting a church in Houston, I think this was me in 2001 being assessed to plant a church and being so nervous that I was sweaty walking into my church planting assessment, and sitting in front of these four guys. I had to sit in front of 4 men, to ask them if I could plant the church in Los Angeles. And I thought, whatever they say, I don't know if I'm a church planter or not. Whatever they say, I'm going to follow. So we walked in. I didn't have language for this, but I felt like I was having an anxiety attack walking into this thing at 31 years old and asking, can I plant the church? And then 3 or 4 years later, finding Acts 29 in around 2004, and walking in and realizing, this is my home. This is my tribe. But what about the future of Acts 29? Is Acts 29 still relevant? Is Acts 29 changing? What are we doing together? I mean, we're 25 years old, so are we like Kmart or Marie Callender's or Mervyn's, or Whataburger? I don't know. We don't have Whataburger in California, but is Acts 29 relevant going forward? So I want to talk to you about the future of Acts 29, who we are, what we're doing, what you can look forward to. And I want to say one main thing that I want you to get in your mind, all right? The future of Acts 29 is continuity. All right, will you say that word with me out loud on the count of 3? It's a big word, continuity. 1, 2, 3, continuity. All right? What does continuity mean? By continuity, what I mean is more of the same. More of the same. So when I say continuity, you know what you can expect. You know what you're going to get. Now, I want you to think about all of the things around us that are changing. Because I'm in my 50s now, like I'm really aware of how different things were. You ever watch a TV show from like 25 years ago? Like you go back and try to watch The West Wing, and you think, this doesn't even look good on my TV anymore. Or you watch something from the 70s, and it's all spread out somewhere. Think about all the things that are changing. You can't buy a house anymore because of price and because of interest rates. The malls are like, have you been to the mall lately? Sandra and I were at the mall a couple days ago, and we're like, man, the days of Stranger Things are just not even relevant anymore. Like, I grew up in that era. Now you just buy your stuff online. I can literally have someone drive me anywhere I want with an app on my phone. All cars are headed toward being electric. I just read a thing about all the car models that are being discontinued this year, because pretty much it says like Audi's going to be completely electric by 2030. Chevrolet wants to be like 75% electric by 2035, so you better get that muscle car soon. Things are changing. They keep updating the iPhone software as soon as I figure out how to use it. So now I'm handing my kids my phone saying, can you please help me put a widget or whatever that is on my phone? You know how your parents, like you're trying to help them figure out how to use technology. I now have a full computer on my watch where I can make phone calls that even acts as a wallet. I have a private conversation, and somehow Instagram hears everything that I say and shows me ads related to the conversation I just had with you. Have you noticed that? We've tried this. We'll like say something 10 times just to see, and somehow it shows up on Instagram. So probably today I'll have new ads on my Instagram app, right? Artificial intelligence is everywhere. All of a sudden it just burst onto the scene. But I sat on the plane with a guy the other day who said to me, I was on the way back from the Bay Area. He said, I've been in artificial intelligence for 15 years. This has all been going on for a long time. You're just finding out about it now, but all of a sudden, it's everywhere. I mean, literally, you can go into artificial intelligence and say, write me the vision of Acts 29, and you should try that. It'll be amazing, the data that it will gather from sessions we've had, and I didn't write my talk today, because you can try, and you'll see that it's not in there. But it'll probably be in there after this. Our favorite athletes are getting old and retiring. Everything's changing. Your kids are growing up, and your parents are getting older. You have to wear reading glasses. Some of you are in that stage. You don't understand the music that Gen Z is listening to today. Marijuana is legal, and the smell seems to travel for like 7 miles. You ever notice that? Like people smoke a cigarette, and it goes 20 feet. People smoke marijuana, and it affects whole counties, right? We can't keep up with all of the rules around sexual orientation. We now use phrases like LGBTQ on the daily, and we aren't sure who's a man or a woman oftentimes. And I don't say that to make a joke. I say like literally, we're not always sure. My point is to say that things are changing constantly around us, but Acts 29 is not. At least not where it matters most. Now, there are 3 areas that I want to emphasize where Acts 29 is not changing. So the future is more of the same. The future is continuity with theology, with relationships, and with missional church planting. Let me unpack these 3 things. First of all, let's talk about theological continuity. many years ago, the first leadership of Acts 29 announced, and I was in the room like probably 20 of you here today were. This person stood up and announced, here's what makes Acts 29 unique. And he announced, we're reformed, we're missional, we're charismatic, and we're complementarian. Who was in the room that day? Anyone? All right, so a few of us were in the room that day. Fairchild, Francisco. And Francisco was like, yes, we're charismatic. And I was like, you mean we're charismatic? I went to John MacArthur's college. I hope this isn't being recorded right now. I could get run out of town, you know? So like literally someone stood up in front and said, we're reformed, we're charismatic, we're missional, and complementarian. Now I knew we were reformed, but we were still trying to figure out that word at the time. I knew we were missional. I didn't know we were charismatic, and we weren't all charismatic. We had various streams running through the room at the time. And complementarianism was kind of a new word. Like that, like I knew what we believed, and we left the room that day, and I think that a card was put in our hands of those four things, because we printed stuff back then. And so a card was put in our hands of those four things. Now, these were later revised to these five things. Number one, we're passionate about gospel centrality. Second, we enthusiastically embrace the sovereignty of God, God's grace in saving sinners. I think if we asked these two young guys that were up here a minute ago, that they would say, yep, we're planting a church in Houston, and we stand on this, or they wouldn't have gotten through assessment. Three, we recognize and rest upon the necessity of the empowering presence of the Holy Spirit for all of life and ministry. Four, we're deeply committed to the spiritual and moral equality of male and female, and to men as responsible servant leaders in both the home and church. These are on our website right now. In fact, if you're assessed, every year you have to sign off saying, I still believe these things. And then five, we embrace a missionary understanding of the local church and its role as the primary means by which God chooses to establish his kingdom on earth. So listen, what draws us together relationally, this is important. What draws us together relationally is unity in this theology. Now, I do have friends that are Christians, and I have friends in my neighborhood that are not Christians that don't believe the same thing. But when I see David Fairchild, who I've known since 2004, I know that this unites us. I know that we have relational commonality about what we believe. And I could plant a church with David Fairchild today, or with Francisco today, because I know that we stand on the same theological truths. What attracts church planters in existing churches to Acts 29 is our clarity on our theology. I went to a church planting gathering a couple of years ago. It was with a different group, a group you probably never heard of before. I hadn't heard of them. They were a smaller group, and there were like 40 church planters in the room, and I just got invited to kind of come and look in on it, and I sat at a table with some folks, and one of them was planting a church in a western U.S. city, and I asked them a little bit about their background, and there was no theological background. The person had got out of prison really recently, had barely started to even believe the Bible, and I thought, it's amazing that like you just got out of prison and you're a Christian. That's fantastic. I just don't know if you're quite ready to plant a church yet. It had literally been like 2 or 3 months, and I thought, man, join a church planting team, be an assistant coach for a while, sit in the pews for a while, learn your theology, not a new convert, and we're not doing that in Acts 29. We have theological convictions that unite us. Now, we don't see all of these issues exactly the same in every moment, and in a network that's broader than a local church, we may live out these convictions in slightly different ways. If you think about Reformed theology, some of you are 12-point Calvinists, and some of you are 4.5-point Calvinists, and wherever you are, but we're committed to Reformed gospel-centered soteriology, right? We're committed to the power of the Holy Spirit. We're committed to complementarianism, and we're committed to a missional understanding of the local church. Now, I've read a couple times online, maybe you have too, accusations that Acts 29 is wavering in these theological commitments. And as we shared with you last night, that's simply untrue, and it doesn't make any sense. It's theological continuity. We have nearly 800 churches who are working out with their elder teams and congregations how to live out these convictions in changing culture. I was just in South Africa just just 3 or 4 months ago, training African cohort leaders from all across sub-Saharan Africa to to start cohorts in there. I mean, we had Portuguese-speaking Africans. I worshiped with One Makatli at his church. One said we have 11 different languages being spoken, and they all believe these same things because they're Acts 29 churches. The future of Acts 29 is theological continuity. And it's important to us that if you visit a church in California where I live, or in Dallas, Texas, or in Guatemala where Francisco is, or in Houston where these two guys are planting, it's important to us that you know what kind of church is being planted and what kind of theology is being believed and preached. A second area that's unchanging in our commitment is relational continuity. Now listen, think about these 3 legs of the stool here, relational continuity. Acts 29 has traditionally been about a word that we've said a lot. It's called brotherhood. And when I say that, I don't want you ladies to feel unincluded in that, because even Jesse and I were talking earlier today. Jesse Roseberry was just up here in a second. We were saying, look, Acts 29 is not just a band of brothers. Now, thankfully, it has oftentimes been a band of brothers, and we're thankful for that. So we're thankful for the brotherhood that's existed. But we also know that we're a group of churches. We also know that we're 78,000 ladies strong in Acts 29 churches. And so I want to say brotherhood is important. That is important. Deep relationships built around shared theology and commitment to missional church planting is important. And so the future of Acts 29 is more of the same with the deep relationships that we have built and we will continue to build. We will always come together around our shared theology, how we do church, and our desire to plant more churches. And that brings relational closeness. Now, years ago when I was a youth pastor, I would go to a thing called the National Youth Workers Convention. And it was the one week of the year where you actually felt like you were being celebrated as a youth pastor. Because you only made $18,000 a year, and you worked 60 hours a week, and you babysat all the other kids while everybody was at big church. And then once a year, you'd go to the National Youth Workers Convention, and there were 3,000 other people like you who were disrespected all year long and honored 1 week a year. And so they would always fly out somebody who really wanted to come. They'd always have this deal where they would fly out somebody that really wanted to come and couldn't afford it and was laboring with 4 kids in their youth ministry. And they bring that person up on stage, and we would all stand up and cheer for that person for 3 minutes. And it'd be like tears, and it was like, yes, we're in youth ministry. We are reaching kids for Christ. I think we have a lot of that in Acts 29. The moment I stepped into that room at Mars Hill all of those years ago in 2004, and I met some of you for the first time, I came home crying. My wife says I was crying. I found our people. This is it. I was at the very first emerging church conference, the very first one, and I was in the front row. I promise you, I'm not exaggerating. Front row on a couch, because at the emerging church conference, you don't sit in chairs, you sit in couches, and you draw while people are speaking and stuff like that. You can sing your own song while the worship team's leading another song. Because it was the very first emerging church conference, right? Because I thought, man, that's what we're doing, emerging church. And then I realized, oh my gosh, we're not the emerging church. I don't think these folks believe the Bible. And then I found Acts 29, and I thought, I thought we were emerging back to the Bible. Then I found Acts 29 in 2004, and I realized, no, it's conservative theology, but we actually want to go into society and reach people for Christ. And that's what drew us together relationally. This is what we have in Acts 29 and what we'll continue to have. And I want to say to you, listen, if you're young and you're just thinking about church planting, you don't have to do ministry alone as a church planter. And you don't have to be alone as a church. You can have camaraderie and brotherhood. You might be laboring in a church of 75 people, wondering why more people are not coming to Christ. Keep in mind that you are a part of something much bigger. Stop by the Latin America booth, get to know Francisco, and figure out what's going on in Latin America with Acts 29 church planting. And then go down there, raise some money, find some people who will support you, and get involved in something that's going on, because you're a part of something where thousands of people are coming to church each year in our tribe, in our churches. Now listen, we have to continue to dig into and build these relationships. And I wrote this last night because I was thinking about this section. I can't do this for you. So we just surveyed a lot of our churches in Acts 29, and certain people said things like the relationships aren't as deep as they used to be. I literally don't know what to do with that feedback. Because, like, if you're in high school and you want friendships, we taught all of our kids now that are adults, like, you have to get out there and find a way to make friends. So how do you make friends? I've got a how do you make friends section in my notes right now, all right? We do this through regions, areas, cohorts, global partnerships, but it's real simple. It's get off the couch. If you want collaboration and friendship, you have to show up to stuff. So I'll have people say to me, man, that Acts 29 planter of that church hasn't come to anything in 5 years. You have to show up to stuff, get off the couch and go. And sometimes you have to hang out with people that aren't even your favorite people. That's called church. You know, it's amazing how many of our friends, 98% of them, we didn't choose. They showed up to our church, they became our friends, and God has sanctified us through their craziness, right? And God has sanctified them through our craziness. So listen, I think about the cohort. You know, I've been leading a cohort in Acts 29 for 7 years. And I think about the fact that one of the guys in my cohort, during COVID, his wife had a routine surgery, walked into the kitchen a few days later, fell down on the floor and died. And he's an Acts 29 pastor. And I think about the fact that our cohort for the next year shepherded him and guided him through the most difficult time of his life. So his church did too. He had elders, he had a local church, he pastored a church in Oregon, but this cohort surrounded him. He had 2 teenage kids, and his wife died unexpectedly, like mid to later 40s. And the relationships in Acts 29, he dug into those because he was intentionally involved in a cohort where he was actively involved. We've been praying for him for years, and I just spoke at a retreat where he was there. I just spoke at the Oregon Man Camp, 650 pastors church folks from 15 Acts 29 churches who all came together, and he was there. We prayed for him again. So I want to say, listen, don't get so comfortable with your old relationships also that you fail to realize that there are 125 Acts 29 church planters that are under 39 years old in Acts 29. So I've had several people come up to me and say, man, I just planted a church a year ago, and I love Acts 29. The future of Acts 29 is theological continuity, relational continuity, and I want to give you one more thing. It's church planting continuity. Now listen, we have always been about church planting since the beginning. 22 years ago, I planted a church. And I've now been a part of planting churches ever since. I mean, I planted a church that planted churches out of that church, and I've now coached hundreds of church planters, and I've led hundreds of church planters in cohorts, literally. Why? Because I believe that the Bible is true, and I believe that Jesus sent us to make disciples, and I believe that the call of the Great Commission is not simply to do a little bit of evangelism, but to plant churches. And so when I go to South Africa and I visit a church plant, when I go to Houston and I visit a church plant, when I go to Brazil, 2 months ago I was in Brazil, and I see us pull up 9 more church planters on stage, I just think, man, that's what I'm excited about. I think about when we planted, and you maybe heard me say this before, we did 2 kinds of evangelism. We did jacuzzi evangelism and food court evangelism. The first was both were fairly awkward, all right? Doing evangelism in your swimsuit is a little awkward, but we lived in an apartment complex, and we're trying to figure out where people were. So where were people in the evening? We're in an apartment. They're at the pool and the jacuzzi, and there are barbecues out there. You call them grills, right? So we went there every night. And there's 2 people in the jacuzzi, and you sit right down next to them and cuddle up next to them, try to get to know them, and it's awkward. And then we would go to the food court at the mall because it's the only place we could afford to eat. And the whole food court on a Tuesday night, there's nobody in it. We would go sit directly next to the only people that were there. They'd be like, there's other tables. We're like, you don't understand. We're planting a church. We're here to meet you. I think about those, I think about those times, and we saw a lot of people come to Christ in our church plant, right? So we've always been about church planting in Acts 29. We're going to continue to do that. So when I have somebody say to me, man, we love the theology, we love the brotherhood, church planting, whatever, we're going to continue to multiply because that is vitally important to us. Listen, your local ministry is vital. Your city needs you. Your church's work is essential. God is drawing people to himself in your city, and you are there. And that's amazing. And let's keep doing that, but let's keep working at this messy commitment to get churches planted. Man, it is messy. The older I get, the more mess. Like, we plant churches and then that church doesn't make it. We plant churches and we did all the assessment and then that church planter blew up his life. It's messy. But we have to keep planting churches because many of you are testimony to the fact that God draws people to himself in church plants. Jesus tells us to make disciples of all nations, and I hope your church is committing to do that both locally and then in church planting. Listen, the future of Acts 29 is continuity. More of the same. Theological continuity, relational continuity, and church planting continuity. Now, let me close with this. Where is Acts 29 going to be in 5 years? I don't know if we will have planted 75 churches or 150 churches or 9 million churches. I don't know. You know, we try to set goals around church planting. It's kind of like setting goals around baptism. You can preach on baptism. You can share the gospel with lost people, but I'm not sure how many people are going to get baptized, right? Because outcomes, I think Matt Chandler mentioned this last night. Like, we can't secure outcomes. That's God's job. So I don't know how many churches will get planted, but here's what I'll say. A vision of Acts 29 in 5 years. We'll still be relationally connected. We'll still be theologically committed in a shifting society that's hostile to our beliefs. We'll still be planting churches because I know our whole leadership team and our board and our staff and our regional directors and our cohort leaders are all about that. And we'll still be supporting each other and working together in a world that's increasingly hostile to our beliefs. Now, I'm really excited about our younger generation because we have 75 church planters or pastors in Acts 29 who are under 34. We just ran the numbers the other day, the best we could figure out. 75 who are under 34 and 125 who are under 39. And some of us felt like, man, we're getting older. But I'm looking around the room, and there's a lot of young people here. Like, I'm old compared to most of you. And if you go to a denominational gathering, maybe you're in a denomination, everybody has hair up to here and still wearing suits. You know, I've been to some of those, and God bless the older folks too, because I'm like, I probably never have a hair up to there and wear a suit again. But I'm super excited about the younger generation of Acts 29 that is growing up into leadership. We're still going to be digging down into that generation. Let me close with you. Let me close with a call to action. What should you do going forward? Like, what do you do now? All right, now, some of this applies to some of you, and some of it applies to all of you. First, as I would say, participate. It's 3 P's. It's really easy. It's very Baptist, all right? It's 3 P's. Participate, all right? So get off the couch. Get in a cohort. I lead 2 of them now. If you're a lead pastor or planter in Acts 29 and you are not in a cohort, you are making a giant mistake. Stop making excuses. Get there 2 days. And if your cohort's no good, contact me personally, and I will make sure that you're in a good cohort. All right, get in a cohort where you're around others who are doing the same thing that you're doing. Connect with folks in your area or region. I think about the Sacramento churches who all preached the same text of Scripture one year. They all said, hey, let's preach through the same book of the Bible. I think about Eastern Washington, where the 8 or 9 churches that are up there in Idaho fully funded a church plant together. So wherever you are, like if you're in the Houston area, Dallas area, find some folks, get involved in that area, in that region, and show up to stuff. All right? It's pretty easy. Show up to stuff, get off the couch, participate. The second thing I want to say to you is plant. All right? Now, what does this mean? All right, because that first category is a little bit more for lead pastors, wives of lead pastors. We do have cohorts for folks that are not lead pastors as well, but what does it mean? What does it mean? What do I mean when I say plant? What I mean is, in your church, think about church planting. I wrote a post for Gospel Coalition probably 10 years ago called How to Become a Church Planting Church. It's still out there. You can just Google it, How to Become Church Planting Church. And I gave you kind of a 5-year track record for how to go from we've never even thought about church planting to becoming a church planting church. And step 1 is not to send out a church planter in 2 months that just became a Christian 2 months ago. Like there's a number of steps along the way. Remember when we planted, we just wanted to get involved. We had $300 a month, so we found a church planter that was being sent by somebody else, and all we had was $300 a month. That's all, like day one. It was years later before we could actually do a residency or an internship. So think about church planting. Look for opportunities to be involved in church planting. Adopt a church planter. Talk about church planting. Do a church planting Sunday. Set aside 10% of your annual budget for church planting. So plant. And then lastly, partner. I want to say this to you too. Find at least one Acts 29 Global and one Acts 29 church in the U.S. to partner with. So we want to, now if you're at a large church like Clear Creek or the Village or Stonegate, you might partner with 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 churches. You know, if you're a smaller church like Spencer just planted a year ago, and you're just getting things off the ground, find it. Like you're larger than most of the churches in the world already, Spencer. You know, so it's time for you to say, who can we partner with? Is there a church in Brazil or Guatemala or somewhere that we can partner with? Is there somebody that's a year behind us that we can begin to partner with so that we can be involved in this church planting work? So listen, be the kind of church that is the church like Spanish River was, who was instrumental in helping plant Acts 29, who's given millions of dollars and helped plant 400 churches as just a Presbyterian church in Florida. So we'll still be relationally connected. We'll still be theologically committed. We'll still be planting churches. Participate, plant, and partner.
A few of you. All right. A couple of questions here for Brian. First, is there still a plan to not only focus on the church planter, but also focus on the church? If so, what will that look like practically?
Yeah, that is a great question. So I would say when Acts 29 first began, it really did focus on lead pastors. But over the course of years, we've realized, wait, we're not just a membership union of a guys club or something like that. We're churches that are involved in church planting. Rodney told me that Stonegate brought their entire team, 30 people or something like that, to this conference. I know that in Denver, we had Park Church brought like 40 people, Living Stones brought 50 or 60 people. And so what I would say is we recognize in Acts 29 that church planting is not just men planting churches. It's churches sending out church planters. It's couples going out as teams, being a part of church planting teams. Now, practically, what does that look like? First of all, we are going to continue to assess church planters. So we're going to continue to do that for sure. We're also going to recognize, in fact, when we design our conferences, we really try. Now this is a regional conference, but if some of you were at our Denver conference, we really try to make sure, particularly in our national events, that we're recognizing. I mean, I think we had 400 or 500 women at the conference in Denver, recognizing the value of every person who's contributing to church planting. So right now our programs are probably still fairly focused on church planters, on lead pastors, on staff pastors, but we do want to make sure that we're recognizing we have teams of elders. And as we design conferences, we have men and women who are going out on church planting teams, that we're really addressing the unique needs around all of that.
That's great. You talked a lot about continuity. You mentioned all the things that are going to stay the same. Can you talk about some of the things that either have changed, are changing, or need to change in Acts 29 going forward?
Wow, that is a great question. Things that have changed, so much has changed in Acts 29. I think over the past 25 years, where it's located has changed, and leadership has changed, and where our churches have changed. I mean, it's interesting, the interesting thing is that if there's a First Baptist church, I've driven by 12 of them in the mile around the church here. So if there's I don't know how there can be so many First Baptists. Are they arguing about who got the Dallas first? But it seems like there's a lot. So if there's a First Baptist church like that has a building that's that's paid for, that church can exist for a long, long, long time with a small group of people in it. But church plants don't have that luxury because oftentimes we don't have those buildings and we don't have that long-term relational infrastructure and that financial stability. So in Acts 29, we've seen leadership change. I wasn't in charge 3.5 years ago. I was the U.S. director before I was in this role, and I was the chairman of the board for 5 years. Things that are changing right now, so we're in a season right now, this feels kind of internal and technical, but I'll tell you, we're in a season right now of listening. So we decided 3 or 4 months ago to survey all of our churches and to interview as many as we could to just ask questions. What's going on in your churches right now? Why did you originally join Acts 29? What do you find to be most beneficial in Acts 29? What feels frustrating that you wish could be better? Questions like that. What would you like to do? How would you like to serve as a part of Acts 29? So I would say we're taking all of that data and feedback right now. Now, what's not changing is deep relationships and theological commitment and church planting. But the forms around some of those things in terms of what's most helpful for church planters, what's most helpful in building partnerships, those are the kinds of things that we're always looking at. So that's what I would say is changing.
One of the things you just mentioned was where Acts 29 is located has changed. And I think that's a significant piece. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. A network that started in Seattle, urban, progressive city, moved to Dallas for a season, and then Sheffield, England, and now is kind of remote and doesn't have that kind of cultural anchor that we once had. How do you think that's affected the work of the network, the culture of the network, and how do we think about that going forward?
Yeah, boy, that's a great question, because I don't know how many of you work remotely, but I was with Ryan Kwan, who pastors Resonate Church, last Wednesday. So I flew up to the Bay. I live in Orange County, California, and I flew up to the Bay Area. It's just about an hour flight. And I Ubered over to Ryan's church, and they had about 40 people, I'm guessing, in the office. Probably half men and half women, super ethnically diverse, because Fremont, outside of the Bay Area where Ryan is a really ethnically diverse community. Ryan made a joke when he introduced me. I'm going to have you guess everybody's ethnicity and age. And I thought, I'm going to get fired in like 3 minutes for making a mistake. But then they surrounded me and prayed for me for like 30 minutes. I thought, wow, this is amazing. Like most of the time when I see, we have like 15 or 20 people from our team here, but they live all over the place. But that's necessary in Acts 29. So I live in California. Justin lives in LA. I live in Orange County. We see each other fairly regularly because we're 50 or 60 miles away from each other in terms of where we live. But Tyler, who's on our leadership team, lives in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is, all the way across the country from us. So we have determined that we don't necessarily need one main place where everybody is, because we need David Pinkney to live in New England, and we need Rodney Wilkinson to live in South Florida, and we need Tyler to live on the East Coast, and we need someone to live in Kansas City, Missouri, and we need Matt Chandler to keep pastoring the Village Church, and I need the beach, And so all that to say, it's a joke that didn't land, but all that to say, we've decided this is, we probably have 40 or 50 folks that are involved in some level of leadership in some capacity, and we can't have Francisco leave Guatemala, because he lives in Guatemala and pastors in Guatemala and leads all of Latin America. And so we've decided that a dispersed sort of environment, but it brings a lot of challenges. It's hard sometimes. So,
if you were going to assess Acts 29 today in terms of just strengths and weaknesses, and this is something that's kind of an ongoing conversation for us, how would you communicate those things? How would you communicate? What are the things that we're doing really well right now? What are the things that are holding us back?
That's a good question too. I would have liked 10 minutes to prepare for that one. What are the things that we're doing really well right now? I'm really excited about our team. I'm excited about our network directors across the world. So I think we have really solid leadership in Acts 29. We have really solid leadership in the United States. We have a number of regional directors. We have really solid leadership all across the world. When I visit Acts 29 churches, it's really clear that theology is important, and doctrine is important, and relationship is important. I think we're doing cohorts fairly well right now. So not amazingly everywhere, but if you ask people like how great, like I'll go to New Zealand in I think March and train all of the Australia, New Zealand folks in how to do cohorts all across Australia and New Zealand, and then we'll train the folks in Southeast Asia how to do that shortly after that. So in terms of second question is what do we need to do better? I'm gonna jump off of what Matt Chandler and I meet with Matt every week, and we work quite closely together. I think we all kind of feel like we've really stressed theology really, really well in the past few years, and we're not quite as missionally edgy. When I say missionally edgy, I don't mean you have to do stupid things that you have to apologize for. I mean are we on the front end of evangelism right now? Like, are we really making an impact? Like, it's good. Like, doctrine is important and truth matters. It'd be interesting if you go read John MacArthur's Matthew commentary and what he says about the Great Commission in his Matthew commentary. In fact, I originally had it in my notes, but I took it out. He essentially says there's one reason God leaves us on this earth. I mean, this is from John MacArthur. There's one reason God leaves us on this earth. It's to seek and to save the lost. There's no other reason. Now, he preached that sermon probably 30 years ago in the early sort of MacArthur days. But I think what we are all really passionate about is to make sure that we are planting missional churches, and that we're not planting churches because we're all the kids of like the 30-year-old flannel-shirted, tattooed, handlebar mustache having kids of the First Baptist elders up the street who are doing church better, but that we're actually regionally, I was hearing these two guys share earlier in Houston and just thinking, man, that is what it is about. So I think what we're most excited about is planting missional churches. Justin's currently working on a system that we're going to help you, equip you to plant missional churches. Rob Barrett, who oversees our training platform called Equip. I mean, Yancey and Matt just shot a bunch of videos. Chandler just shot a bunch of video this morning on preaching to help you learn to preach more effectively. So I'm excited about that kind of stuff. You could probably share 5 more things.
Probably could, but I won't. All right. Is there anything about the last 4 years of your leadership of Acts 29 that you would do differently if you could do it again?
Wow. I told Justin earlier today, don't ask me any super hard questions. Give me a little time to prepare. So thank you guys for
These are the easy ones.
Those are the easy ones. Is there anything I would do differently? There are always things I would do differently. In fact, sometimes I turn around and think, I'm 52 years old, and I still don't know very much. I mean, I got some degrees. I've read a lot of books. I've coached literally over 1,000 leaders. You know, I've started several companies. I've been a part of planting many, many churches. I'm currently halfway through a PhD in organizational leadership. I can tell you everything about organizational theory since 1850 on. I do have a seminary degree, not everything, but I do have a seminary degree. I preached through 13 books of the New Testament. You know, I pastored for 25 years, and yet I still feel like I make decisions and I turn around and think, man, I wish I had done that differently. Now, exactly what those things are, I don't know if I'm willing to get into details on those things, you know, but I'll say, like, you know, Peter Drucker in his book, The Effective Executive, says it doesn't matter how much due diligence you do, only 1/3 of the people that you hire are going to work out. So think about that. So Peter Drucker, like the greatest, and a believer, like the greatest leadership thinker probably of the 20th century, said, and none of us are that great at hiring anybody or making decisions. We're just guys in rooms going, all right, let's pray about this. What should we do next? You know, and yet a lot of those decisions don't turn out. So I've hired people that I might not hire again. We've tried structural things that I probably wouldn't try again. But all those things, it's like, and if you want to ask me one-on-one, you know, I probably don't want to say it all on video, but if you want to ask me one-on-one, like, what would you do differently? I could probably give you some more specifics. At the same time, we don't make decisions flippantly. So we have a board that makes, like, you realize Hunter Beaumont, Donnie Cho, Vic Keller, Matt Chandler, myself, like, we are prayerfully making decisions, and then our senior leadership team. And I'd put the question back on you. Justin probably wrote it, but I'll put the question back on you. Have you ever made any decisions in your parenting, in your local church, and in your life that you wish, man, I wish I'd have done that differently? I made decisions yesterday that I wish I'd have done differently. Like, I raised 4 kids. Like, they're adults. And I can remember doing things, and my kids don't think I'm angry. They feel like you were a loving dad, and I still am like, Jackson, I'm sorry that I said that. I shouldn't have said that or whatever. My kids don't even remember, but what I constantly want to be doing is learning from my mistakes, admitting my mistakes, repenting what I've sinned, and then moving forward.
I think probably that second queso at lunch would be one of those decisions you regret.
That's probably true.
All right, here's a softball. How does the lead pastor get involved in a cohort? What does the commitment look like? When do they meet and where? And what's the on-ramp?
That is an easy question. Thank you for that question. How does a lead pastor get involved in a cohort? I started a thing called Cohort 7 years ago. Because I'm thinking it was 7 years ago. It was about then. Because when I was a larger church pastor, I was invited by Leadership Network into a cohort with the number. You had to be under 40, so it was a while ago. And we were put in a group. You had to pastor a large church to be under 40. And so I was in a group with J.D. Greer and Sean Lovejoy and Noel Hakenen and Daniel Montgomery and some other large church pastors. And it was an amazing 2-year experience. So Matt Chandler was in a group, in a Leadership Network group right before me. I think I was in the one right after him. And years later, I realized we don't have this in Acts 29. And so I started this with, in fact, David Fairchild, who's in the room, was in my very first cohort, I think, a number of years ago. And we just started to meet together twice a year for 2 days. And we would come in and everybody had to come prepared with a couple things. Like, what's one thing that's going really well in your ministry right now? Let's all share that with each other so we can learn from each other. What's something that just really you're not doing well right now? Let's do that right now so we can learn from each other. And then what's a resource you're learning about? And we just started to share those things with each other and found that, man, this is really, really amazing when we just get together twice a year and spend that time together. Now, how do you do that? You send us an email and say, I'm a lead pastor and I want to be in a cohort. You go on the web, is that what it's called? The World Wide Web, the www. And you click on that and you send us an email and say, I'm a lead pastor and I'm not in a cohort. And Justin and I will personally make sure that you get put in a cohort where you can grow together and learn stuff. Like I lead a cohort right now with Matt Chandler, Joby Martin, Bruce Wesley, Rodney Hobbs, who spoke this morning, Leonce Crump. Those guys are in a cohort that I lead right now. We started it 2 years ago. I just get in that room, get those guys talking to each other, get out of the way, and let us grow together. And let me just tell you a story about this. I'm watching the clock here, but so in our cohort that Rodney's in, we went to this retreat center, and there's kind of this janky golf course out there. All right, and you can go out, and they've got some golf carts, and so four of us, I actually didn't play golf. I went out with 4 other guys who were playing golf, and Rodney brought his fishing pole with him. And Rodney was casting his line out into these alligator-infested ponds in Florida, and another guy who was in our cohort said to Rodney, and he just told us this recently. He said to Rodney, "Why do you bring your fishing pole out?" And he said, "Because guys who like to fish just like casting." All right, so he goes back to his church and he says, you know what? I think people that like to fish like casting. So he preaches a series, and then he learns from Joby Martin about this thing called One More. Because if you go to 1122 in Florida, everybody there will tell you, like, I was Kelly's One More, or I was Savannah's One More. Because they do a thing always in their church where everybody has a one more. You might not be able to lead everybody to Christ, but you can lead one more person to Christ. Every time I'm at 1122, I meet someone and they say, I'm so-and-so's one more. Because people are coming to Christ at 1122 every week. So this brother who's in our cohort takes this back to his church. And because of his interaction with Rodney, in his interaction with Joby, he goes back and they baptized 80 people 4 weeks ago. It's a big church in New Jersey, right across the Washington Bridge from New York City, right? And so all of that happened in the cohort. So he comes here and people are getting saved, and God's on his throne and God's sovereign. But when we get together in those cohorts, man, we are sharpening each other and learning together. In the last cohort, we only talked about 2 things the entire time: evangelism and discipleship. That's all we talked about. So, like, what are you guys doing right now to see people come to Christ in your churches? And then what are you doing to disciple people? We talked about nothing else for 2 days. So that's what happens. How you get in one, send us an email. Oh, no. Just go to the next question. Right?
Well, just
Justin was going to make fun of me for not being brief there, but you needed to hear that exhortation right there.
No, it's great.
See?
It's great.
See the heads nodding.
No,
put a cowboy hat on this guy.
Just to review, if you want to get in a cohort, just click the World Wide Web, and we guarantee we'll get you in a cohort.
Justin's so young, he's 43. He's so technologically advanced. These people over here weren't even like, they were like 5 when you were born. So.
Fine.
That didn't
Just
work at all.
for clarity's sake, email me, justin.anderson@acts29.com, and I'll get you in a cohort.
Sorry for the insider speak there.
That's great.
But,
That's great.
You say dumb things when you're in front sometimes.
All right, last question. This is a two-part question. What is an exhortation that you have for the younger leaders in the room? And what is an exhortation you have for the mature leaders in the room?
Yeah, man. First of all, my exhortation is going to be, it's going to be the same for both of you. And I just want to encourage you to love the lost people around you. Because man, whether you're younger or older, I mean, there's enough people in here to see lots of lost people come to Christ. And so in your neighborhood, I mean, I've been really moved by what both Josh Patterson said today and what Matt Chandler said last night. I was texting Matt earlier today just saying, because he had to leave early last night, just saying, man, like your mic drops about C.S. Lewis and whoever else, Augustine, that he was talking about last night, and then Josh Patterson just saying, like, this is our time, and this time is for us. I want to say to younger and older people, man, first of all, like, do the work of evangelism and reach the people that are around you. I remember years ago, the first planting pastor of Sojourn Houston taught many of us location, vocation, recreation. My kids still say that to me all the time. They say, Dad's your sermon today going to be on location, vocation, and recreation, because they know it so well. You know, where you work, where you play, where you live. Like, God has placed you there. And so pray for the lost people around you and look for opportunities to point people to Christ. And then I would say to the younger leaders, like, we need to know that you're here, so make yourself known. Make yourself known. Like, we need to begin, like, Justin in particular is very old, but you know that we're getting older, and we need the younger leaders to rise up and to rise up into leadership. We need young cohort leaders. We need young speakers, so make yourself known. And then for you older folks, I think what I want to say to you, you know, there was a TED Talk years ago called "What Do We Do with Our Old People?" And essentially it said, like, we need our old people to get off the platform and to become mentors. Now, I don't mean if you're like 41, get off the platform, but I do think we need to be looking as older leaders to give younger leaders opportunities, to develop those younger leaders. A famous sort of evangelical leader that we all know who he is, he was asked one time, what's the thing that surprised you most about evangelical Christianity in the United States? And he said that the baby boomers haven't passed on the institutions to the next generation. That's what he said. Like a lot of the current leaders who are 70 today became leaders when they were 35. Not when they were 60. And so I want to say to those of you that are in the room that are my age or maybe older, to begin investing in that next generation and to begin. Now, I'm not saying you have to retire, and if you're 35, don't shove out the 58-year-old. You have to show, like, I hope John Piper's got some more years in him. I mean, we just lost Tim Keller, and it was heartbreaking, wasn't it? I mean, it feels like you lost your spiritual dad losing Tim Keller. And so we need these older guys. So don't shove them aside, young guys. But we also, as older guys, need to be platforming and developing those younger guys.
That's great. All right, we'll end there. So can you guys thank Brian for me?